Welcome back to part 2 of how combat works in 5th edition D&D. We're going to be carrying on where we left off, but if you missed that video, I'm just going to leave a little link down in the description below for you to click on and find out what we did last time. As always guys, before we get started with the video, if you enjoyed the last one that we did, then make sure to leave a little thumbs up on this video and subscribe for more instructional videos like this every single week. It really helps us out to grow, so I really appreciate it if you do. Thanks very much, and let's get started with the video. So another type of attack that you might want to make is grappling. If you're within combat range of something and you're struggling to deal with its damage, maybe it's destroying a bunch of your friends, or maybe you can't seem to do very much damage to it, none of your weapons seem to be working, none of them can seem to beat its armor class, you might try grappling with it. Maybe you rugby tackle it to the ground, maybe you try and grab its arms as its hammer comes down to do a final blow on one of your friends. Grappling covers anything where you physically interact with an enemy in a way that would distract it, harm it, be problematic for it, that involves a contest of strength between you and it. Again, remember that DM's creatures can do this to you as well, and the result can be incapacitation. So you could grab this thing in a bear hug, meaning that it can't move and it can't attack, or you could wrestle its weapon away from it so it can't hit people with it anymore. But to find out how this works exactly, you're going to have to roll a contest of strength. In this, both you and the creature roll a d20, and then you add your strength modifier to it. Now sadly you don't get to be proficient in this, but whoever's number ends up higher is the victor. If you, the person attempting the grapple, wins, then you are successful. They are grappled to whatever end you decide. If they win, then they are not grappled. You fail, you still cost your entire action to do this, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Now if you're successful, you can then pin this creature, whether on the floor or standing upright, and that means that other players have advantage to attack this creature because it's distracted while fighting you. Now it has a chance, or you have a chance if you're the one grappled, you have a chance every single turn to break out of this grapple, to either use dexterity to slide away, or to compete with another strength check to see if you can burst out of the confines of the person holding onto you. That is also a main action though. So this can really hinder combat if you or somebody else gets grappled, but equally you can really stop someone from doing any damage if you manage to grapple them. Something else you might like to do with your attack is to shove someone. Now it's not a damaging attack, just like grappling, basically throw someone off balance, knocking them to the floor. While prone, everybody gets advantage to attack them. So they can roll twice to hit, whichever one ends up best, they get to pick, therefore being twice as likely to actually deal damage to them, beating their armor class. Now when you're rolling to hit something, keep an eye out. Because if you roll a 20-sided dice and you land on a 20, that's called a critical hit. If you roll a 20-sided dice and you roll a 1, that's called a critical miss, or a crit fail. With a critical hit, it doesn't matter what numbers you add onto that, or however high the armor class of the creature is. You could be fighting a god whose armor class is 83,000, who knows? If you crit, you still hit them no matter what. Similarly with a critical fail, no matter how many numbers or extra additions you put on top of that attack, no matter what happens, that still automatically fails. But then a little bit more happens. The standard rules indicate that once you critically hit something, you can roll your damage twice. You hit it in a really vulnerable spot and you do a massive amount of damage, or maybe you're just filled with rage and you happen to put all of your weight into that one attack. DMs like to homebrew this part. We use a lot of tables and so on and so forth when you critically hit things that might add some drama to that moment because it happens so rarely that maybe damage isn't enough. Sometimes you might say that a limb is removed, or maybe you kill the creature entirely. Who knows, maybe lightning strikes, I don't know. But the standard rules say you roll twice and you do extra damage. DMs might have a special system in place for what happens when you critically hit. Same with when you critically fail. It's the DM's job to figure out just how badly you screwed up, and as it's a crit fail, spectacularly is usually the way. This might mean that you drop your gun instead of shooting someone with it, it goes off on the floor and blows one of your own toes off. Even worse, it might mean that you swing your axe way too early, missing the creature entirely, but embed it halfway in the head of one of your friends. You might fall over and lose half of the items in your backpack. Who knows? Again, it's up to the DM to roleplay what happens in that moment. Again, we tend to use a lot of tables that are not part of the core game to indicate this. I like to come up with tables all the time for what critical fails might be like to give me a more reliable indication rather than rolling it on the fly. So I might not always be as creative on one day as I might be on the other. But again, that's not for you to decide, that's for your DM. Now for casting spells. Spells function sort of similarly to how you might attack something, but obviously they're not always attacks, and they cost magical energy in order to use. When you start off with, if you are a spellcaster, you'll notice that you know a certain number of first level spells, and you also have a certain number of spell slots. The important distinction here is that the number of spells that you know is always different from the number of spell slots. You might have a vast knowledge of spellcraft, but only a certain amount of spell slots, a certain amount of magical energy represented by a number of spell slots to then cast some of those spells with. You can't cast them every single time, you can't cast the same ones every single time, but you have this well of energy, we'll say, that you can draw upon to cast spells. Think of spell slots as ammunition in a gun that fires spells. Once they're out, you are done, but each of those bullets might do something different, if that makes sense. So with your turn, you load up the relevant spell slot that you want to use. You say, I'm going to expend a first, second, third level spell, what have you, and once I've expended that spell slot, I'm going to cast this spell with it, whatever spell you fancy casting. Now cantrips are a little bit different. You'll notice that sometimes you have cantrips, and those are spells that you can do at any time. They still count as a main action ability, but they won't cost any spell slots to use, so you can use them as frequently as you like, is what I should say. Either way, once you've decided on the spell that you want to cast, and you've taken away the relevant spell slot if you need to, then you get to cast your spell. Now make sure to read the spell description really carefully, because some of them require you to do stuff, some of them require nothing of you. You might cast a blessing in a certain area. That just happens. But if you might shoot a ray of magical energy at someone, like a ray of frost, you'll still need to roll to hit, just like you would with a weapon. However, because this is a spell, and it's not using physical prowess to do, you can use your casting ability, which is different for each class. For example, warlocks might use charisma from this, because it's a natural ability that exudes from them. Clerics might use wisdom, because they've learned these skills over years, or wizards who figure out their own spells through mathematics and ingenuity will use intelligence to cast their spells. In this case, just like a weapon, you would roll a d20 and add your intelligence modifier to it. On top of that, you're proficient in your spell, so you'd add your proficiency bonus as well, and if that number beats the armor class of the creature, hey presto, you've managed to hit it. If not, then never mind. Unfortunately, you still spent that spell slot anyway, because it counts the same amount of magical energy to use that spell whether you hit or miss with it. Some spells, however, cause an area of an effect. Let's say a fireball, for example, will hit a huge area, and that'll hit every ally or enemy inside that zone, no matter what. You won't have to roll to hit because you're hitting a huge zone. It's not targeted at one thing in particular. And in the case of spells like this, things with a cone or things that affect an area, generally speaking, in the spell's description, it'll say that people will have a chance to avoid the impact of this blast. They'll see it coming a mile away, and they'll get a chance to do something about it. Now, in the case of fireballs, that's a dexterity saving throw. You can use dexterity to leap out of the way, avoiding the brunt of the blast. You still get singed, you still take half damage if you manage to pass a difficulty saving throw, but if you fail, never mind, you're in the middle of it and you burn to a crisp. Now, the difficulty rating is something that you worked out when you first made your character, and that's the same for each of your spells. If anything ever says that someone needs to make a difficulty saving throw of whatever type, dexterity, intelligence, what have you, versus your spells, is always your spell save difficulty that you worked out when you made your character. Some spells like Hellish Rebuke specify that you can perform this spell as a reaction, and reactions work a little bit differently. Very few people get reactions, but they happen exclusively in the enemy's turn. They're usually as a response to danger, and allow you to, in this case, expend a spell slot in order to cast another spell on the fly. Downside is obviously you've expended another spell slot. Upside is you didn't take any of your turn to cast it. So again, just make sure to read your spells really carefully. Make as many notes as you need to function as quickly as you can to not break the immersion by reading through a lot of books, but no pressure if you're just starting out. As I covered earlier, dashing is getting to move your movement speed again instead of attacking or casting a spell, in case you really need to get down that corridor just in time, but disengaging is a really important one. If you get into combat something, you're within 5 feet of it, you get to attack it just like normal, but if you suddenly decide that you need to go and help somebody else who looks like they're in a lot of trouble and they're a decent distance away, they're going to need you to move towards them to heal them, let's say. Or maybe the creature that you're fighting is really tough and you need to get away, you massively overestimated your own abilities, then running away is actually a really bad idea. You see, as you turn to run away, the creature will decide you look really vulnerable right now, grab you by the scruff of the neck, pull you back into combat, and has a free, what's called an opportunity attack in the middle of your turn. Just like the reactions that I mentioned a second ago, they get a reaction to you trying to run away and get a chance to roll to hit you as they normally would outside of turn order to beat you up. So if you're running away because you're already dying, then that could be really bad news for you. On the upside, this again, the same rule applies for you. So if something tries to turn and flee away from you, for example, if the cleric of the group just casts Turn Undead while you're in combat with a lot of undead creatures, guess what? If they turn and flee, you get a lot of opportunity attacks. However, if you spend your main action to disengage, that means that when you turn to move away, when you turn to run away, you do so in such a stealthy way or in such a way as to distract the creature that you're fighting so that it does not provoke an opportunity attack. Super useful in a pinch. Obviously, you don't get to do that extra bit of damage, you don't get to dash, but it does mean you get away safely. Dodging is a great thing to do if you're the tank of the party. It doesn't always necessarily mean that you're dodging. You might instead put your shield up and be a bulwark of the party, but what it means is foregoing the ability to attack, foregoing casting spells, disengaging, all this kind of stuff. You decide to make yourself more sturdy, dodge around, be way more distracting, what have you, and it just means that the creature that's trying to attack you has disadvantage to attack you. They have to roll twice and pick the worst number to try and beat your armor class when they hit you with a weapon or a spell or whatever, giving you a massive chance to survive the next attack. Now the help action is a really vital one as well. If in the middle of combat someone's trying to solve a puzzle and they have to do it while the water level is rising and all these creatures are pouring out through the walls fighting your enemies, they have a limited amount of time in this window to solve a puzzle that will supposedly fix everything. It'll banish all the monsters that are fighting you, reduce the water level, everyone will be safe. But in the meantime, the party is fighting off these creatures because they know that they have to keep this one person safe. You can instead break from combat and decide to help the person solving the puzzle. Maybe they're trying to break down a door, maybe they're trying to hold a door from an invasion of zombies, something like that. They're trying to perform a task and you know that they'll be better off if you help them. The help action is the thing that you want to choose in that example. If you're close enough to do so, for example the door, if you're holding back an armada of zombies trying to break like a wave across a door and you happen to be within 5 feet of that door, you can use the help action to help someone who is trying to hold it. And basically what that'll mean for them in this case is that they're making a strength check to hold the door back, but with your help they get advantage on that check. If someone's solving this puzzle and they're making an Arcana check to see if they can solve it and you go over and help them, you're offering suggestions and they'll get an advantage on their intelligence check, and so on. Now hiding's a really great one because basically you go into stealth mode, you hide around a corner behind some cover. If you're a halfling, you might be able to hide behind other players. Either way, it means that the creature, whatever you're fighting, loses sight of you and gives you a better chance to reposition yourself for a surprise attack. Basically the way this manifests is if you choose to hide in your main action, and that requires some cover, maybe some smoke, maybe for you to be really small, maybe for this creature to be really massive, who knows, the DM will tell you whether or not you can hide if you want to try and attempt it. It means that the next attack that you make on this creature, if you're successful in hiding, will be an attack with advantage, meaning you're twice as likely again to hit it, meaning good times for all. This is going to be a sort of guerrilla warfare style tactic. It can really turn the tide of battle if you use it right. Now searching is pretty self-explanatory. If you're looking for a button that will turn on the flame traps in this room, burning all of your enemies to a crisp, or hoping to seal the entrance to this room but you can't find it anywhere in the middle of combat, then you can search. That takes a whole action, but it basically denotes that something's going to take a really long amount of time to successfully find. At least 6 seconds of frantic searching. Use object is pretty self-explanatory. Just like any weapons, you'll be using something that's in your hands. That might be a magic item that doesn't fit the specifics of a weapon, like an amulet or a crown that allows you to detect thoughts, who knows? Maybe it's pulling a lever, maybe it's pushing a button, maybe it's opening a door, who knows? But that is the use object part of an action. Now, if none of these seem applicable to your situation for using your main action, then the other option is to hold an action. Now in this case, what you do is you wait for your turn to come back round again, or for something else to occur. Let's say you and your friends are awaiting an ambush. You know that some guards are going to come down a corridor and your initiative order is up. You don't want to throw a fireball down the corridor right now. You want to wait until the guards are within range of your fireball to do so. You're going to leap out and attack them. You'll say that you want to hold your action until certain requirements are met. For example, the guards coming down the corridor within range of your fireball, and then you're going to cast your fireball. At which point, whenever that thing occurs, you will successfully cast your spell, and the rest of your turn will be completed. Now importantly, this is hold action and not hold turn. You can still move, you can still do any bonus actions, what have you. You're just holding onto your main action to do something different. It'll then trigger when whatever specifics you say happen. Now it's important to be really specific about this. Be like wish spell level specific about what you say. For example, if you say, rather than when those guards come down the corridor within range of my spell, I'm going to cast fireball. If you were to say, the first creature that comes down that corridor, I'm going to fire a fireball at. A little mouse might run down the corridor. One of your friends might run down the corridor. This would still trigger your ability, and the DM would say, you cast your fireball. So at the risk of incinerating your friends, healing your enemies, or what have you, make sure to be super specific about when and what is happening when you hold an action. When are you going to do your main action? If nothing's triggered before your next turn in initiative order, then that goes away. You don't continuously hold on to the idea of casting a fireball. If you want to continue it, you'll have to then hold an action in your next turn, and so on. But you get the picture. Be specific, but you can do your main action later on. Now, not everybody gets a bonus action when it comes to the final part of a turn. Again, you do if you have an offhand weapon, as I mentioned before. If you have spells that occur during bonus actions, again, you can use those. Or if something about your character sheet says that you can do that kind of thing as a bonus action. For example, rogues and monks, under certain circumstances, get to dash or dodge and so on and so forth as bonus actions instead of main actions, making them a bit more nimble, a bit more agile. But if you have nothing that indicates that you get a bonus action, then you don't get one. As standard, everybody gets a movement action and a main action. Also, any free actions that they want to make during their turn. Once you've completed those, that goes on to the next person in turn order. They get to do all the same stuff. It goes round in the initiative order, and then the next round begins and you'll get another chance to act. So that's how combat works in 5th edition D&D. I hope you found this video really useful. If you did, make sure to leave a little like down below, maybe favorite this video, or subscribe for more content like this every single week. Until next time, I'll see you later.